Hello, my guest today is Uther Naysmith. He is a British citizen and has studied law at the University of Oxford and has just completed a master's degree in law at the University of Edinburgh. He was a member of the British Labour Party from 2015 to 2022. He has also written political and academic articles for organizations including the Labour Party, the Fabian Society, which is the world's oldest socialist think tank, and the British-based Haldane Society for Socialist Lawyers on topics ranging from constitutional reform and freedom of contract to deindustrialization, land ownership, and the future of socialism in the 20th century. He is here today to talk to us about everything British politics.
But how long are you
I'm sorry.
expecting this? Oh, sorry, I was just
Uh,
asking how long are you expecting it to be?
I would say like maybe 30, 40 minutes or so. If
Okay,
we
that's
go
a good length.
longer, because I have another one at 10, but if we do go longer than that, we can. So basically, welcome to the podcast, Uther. Can
Thanks
you
for having me.
describe your, no problem. Can you describe your background and what motivated you to become involved in left-wing activism?
Yeah, sure. My background is I have a law degree from the University of Oxford, and I've just completed a master's degree in law at the University of Edinburgh. Um, why I sort of got involved with left-wing politics? Well, two reasons really. One is I grew up in poverty, and
Hmm.
I think there's a strong sense amongst a lot of people that if you're from a more working class background, the left wing is, maybe not perfect, but it's a clear choice between left and right as to which one your interests lie with. But also, um, my parents raised me with a sort of strong moral values to believe in justice and dignity and human rights and so on and so forth. And well, I find generally those values align more with the left wing than with the right wing. And why I got into activism specifically was, funnily enough, it was to support the leadership election of Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the British Labour Party in 2015. Jeremy Corbyn is sort of the British Bernie Sanders, if you will. This old school left winger whose positions are sort of quite radical compared with most politicians. And I got into activism to support him because I and a lot of others at the time felt like he was one of the few politicians who talked about issues that matter to ordinary people, like housing and healthcare and education and so on.
All right. So, what does your activism consist of?
Yeah, well, in the past, I was a member of, as I say, a member of the Labour Party in Britain, and that a lot of that involves, going to local meetings, and during election times, you go out and canvass for votes, knocking on people's doors and explaining the policies to them and saying, "Would you consider maybe voting for us, please?" and all that kind of stuff that is part of election campaigns. I also attended a couple of conferences as a delegate. I attended one of the Young Labour, the youth wing of the Labour Party, one of the Young Labour conferences. You sort of debate and vote on policy motions to sort of create the party platform or help create the party platform. And I've also given a few speeches here and there on topics like healthcare and human rights and sort of left wing politics more generally. However, in 2022, I left the Labour Party in disagreement with the new direction it's been taking under its current leader, a man called Keir Starmer. And I'm currently sort of an unaffiliated voter, at least between the major parties. And well, my activism now consists much more of writing, political writing, and stuff like articles for, or trying to write articles for left-wing journals and media publications and stuff like that. I hope that sums it up.
Hey, that's that actually did sum it up. Now, you said you left the Labor Party because of the direction. So I'm assuming the Labor Party, that's like the left wing party. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Now, is that the most left wing party? Because I know in Britain you guys have multiple parties, where here in the US we really only have two. So, why did you? What about the direction caused you to leave the Labor Party? And are there any other political parties that you're looking at that that seem like that you might be interested in getting involved with?
Yeah. So the Labour Party is sort of Britain's centre-left party, roughly analogous to the Democrats. And our Conservative Party, which is currently in government, is sort of like the Republican Party. And we do have other parties. We have the Liberal Democrats, and they're sort of like, oh, how would you sum them up? Sort of moderate internationalist liberals. You have the Green Party, who are environmentalists, and you have a bunch of other parties as well, of sort of fringe parties on both the far right wing and the far left wing. I am actually a member of another political party called the Breakthrough Party, which was, or is, sorry, a sort of small Democratic Socialist political party set up in 2021, I believe, to sort of oppose the direction of the Labour Party. So I joined that, and I think it's a promising venture. We'll see how it turns out. We'll see if they manage to get their feet off the ground. But the reason why I left Labour is because the new leader um, has taken the party in a really, really right-wing direction and abandoned a lot of the policies that made me, well, all of the policies that made me want to vote for the Labour Party in the first place. So promises like abolishing tuition fees, renationalising public services and bringing them into state control, like water and electricity and stuff, railways, going back on promises to bring in more rights for labour unions. I mean, that one was a really big one for me. And he's just sort of abandoned all of these promises one by one. And, you have to have a red line somewhere and say enough is enough. And when he first got elected, I really, really tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, saying, no, no, let's see where he takes it. Maybe he will unify the party, maybe be a sort of like Joe Biden-like figure, not perfect, but doing some good things. But he's just completely lost my trust and confidence. And, you have to say enough is enough.
Yeah. I, the things you mentioned, like the issues with your party, I kind of feel the same way about the Democrats. I feel like around 2016, the whole kind of world kind of shifted to the right. In America, the Democrats, um, they're left wing in America, but compared to anywhere else in the world, they would be considered right wing. So my question for you is, why does it seem like there was a shift to the right? And does it seem like the right wing has been growing exponentially a lot more than the left? And why do you think that is?
Interesting question. Um, why do I think there was a shift in 2016? Well, I mean, a lot of things happened in 2016. There was obviously the election of Donald Trump in America. There was Brexit in the UK. Um, I think really over the past sort of 10 to 15 years, there's been a real sort of drift to the right wing ever since the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, this crisis destroyed people's livelihoods all over the world, unemployment, poverty, inequality, ballooning inequality. And yet, for some reason, people have, as you say, drifted to the right wing rather than the left wing. And sort of 2016 was the turning point, I think, when it suddenly became noticeable for a lot of people that this was happening. Um, But a lot of people, I speak to a lot of people who are quite confused by this and say, well, surely if there's more poverty and more inequality after the 2008 financial crisis, people ought to be voting for left-wing parties because those are the ones that want to tackle these issues. But you've seen a lot of people who were traditionally left-wing, not just in America, but in Britain and all across the world, in France, in Germany, voters who were working class voters who used to be sort of supporters of left-wing parties who have gone over to the extreme right, like I'm trying to think of an example, like Pennsylvania steelworkers voting for Donald Trump because he
Hmm.
promises to bring the jobs back. And America first, to them means um, protectionism and ending the outsourcing in industry. And you have a lot of very, very bitter and angry people who've been left behind by the sort of creation of this global neoliberal economic system who now find their interests, or at least perceive their interests, to be better represented by the right wing than sorry, excuse
No,
me,
you're okay.
cheers, than the left wing. And sort of similar things in Britain, where a lot of working class communities, like places where they used to have coal mining and shipbuilding and the steel industry and textiles, all these things, for decades were solid seats for the constituencies for the Labour Party, wouldn't dream of voting Conservative. It would be like spitting on their parents' graves almost. Um, and suddenly now you find a lot of them voting for Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party and Brexit and all these sort of right-wing political ideas. And yeah, it's definitely happened. As for why, well, I mean, I think that's a far too big question for me to answer. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say I think the declining living standards have really, really sort of made people feel quite concerned about the modern world and all these culture war issues you see. I think they're really reflections of underlying economic divisions. Your first instinct in a crisis is to pull up the drawbridge, to isolate
Hmm.
yourself, and that's how a lot of these movements, these right-wing movements, have been responding, and it sort of has an alluring appeal to it. Um, so yeah, I think it's a lot
Yeah,
of complex factors, but that's the one that sticks out for me.
yeah, I think you summed it up. I think that we've become a sort of global economy, and a lot of jobs have been shipped overseas, and they haven't really done anything to kind of shore up the base. At least the left wing hasn't. Here in America, I feel like left wing does a poor job of reaching out to working class people, especially like working class poor white people.
Mm.
Um, do you feel the same way in Britain? Because I kind of feel like left wing people kind of come off as kind of like this hoity toity, better than thou, and it kind of turns off a lot of working class people. At least here in America, is it the same over in Britain or?
I oh sorry, yeah, I do very very much think it's the same in Britain. Um, and it's a shame because you go back to the past and some of the most, all the most, fierce, most passionate left wing, labor unionists, socialist politicians. These people were leaders of and belonged to a working class movement. Like look at Eugene Debs, for example, a personal hero of mine. Um, and the sort of left wing political movement has lost its base, which was in the trade union movement. Um, and part of why you see more working class people becoming politically apathetic or going over to the right wing, part of it is because they don't like the left and the values they perceive the left as representing. But another part of it, I think, is the sort of complete destruction of the trade unions in the modern world. Like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher did a huge amount of work to destroy the power of organized labor. In America, it was the air traffic controllers that went on strike and were all sacked by the government, sort of like terminated basically without notice and replaced by, I think, military scabs or something like that. And in Britain, it was the miners' strike, and Margaret Thatcher's government passed a bunch of anti-union laws. And you see, like in the union membership going up and up in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, and then in the 1980s, bang, millions of people left that movement because it could no longer guarantee them prosperity and real improvements in their lives. And suddenly, you couldn't have a household where one person worked and supported a family. That became a dream, a utopian dream for most people. And I think the fact that we now live in a world where we're expected to be individuals and compete with each other, constant competition for resources, for jobs, for pay rises and promotions and stuff, rather than seeing our interests in the collective interests of the working class. And this change sort of being brought on by the death of the trade unions as a serious political force. I think that's why the left has lost its material base, if you will, which existed in the sort of representative of the representative institutions of the working class. And that's why I think it's so great to see stuff like the Amazon Labor Union and the Starbucks workers organizing in America and similar stuff in other places. It gives me hope that we can find our way back to that movement.
Yeah, I hope so too. But I'll be honest with you, I don't have that much enthusiasm. I think that Amazon labor, last time I checked, has kind of stalled out,
Oh,
and
that's a
then
shame.
yeah. So let's switch gears here a little bit. I want to ask about Brexit. I know this is a huge and complex topic, but I want to kind of like boil it down to what it is. Here in America, when it comes to like news and things like that, it's very hard to get a concrete like idea of what's going on. So like first of all, what is Brexit? Why did people want it? And how has it affected the British economy?
Okay. Well, I mean, very, very simply, Brexit was the vote by Britain in a referendum to exit the European Union. The European Union, of course, being the sort of European trading bloc of 27 nations. I think it's now 27 nations now that we've left, that make laws and pass regulations to sort of facilitate commerce and the flow of money and trade between the different nations of the European Union. And gosh, the reason why, well, that's a very complicated question. We voted to leave. Well, it depends who you ask. I think there's two ways of looking at it. Some people say it was because the British population are a bunch of racists, and it was mostly motivated by hatred for refugees and immigrants. And, if you look at it, the Leave campaign really sort of whipped up, led by Nigel Farage, whipped up hatred of immigrants and said, we have to vote to leave because while we're in the European Union, we have all these foreigners coming here and taking jobs for British workers, and that's not something we want. They're unruly, they're dangerous, etc. Sort of like a proto-Donald Trump. And there was a lot of genuine racism during the campaign, and most horrifically, almost immediately after we voted to leave, we saw quite a big spike in hate crimes against foreigners and ethnic minorities. Terrible stuff. So there was a racist element to it. But there was also another element, which was that after several years of austerity under a conservative government and several decades of neoliberalism since Margaret Thatcher, a lot of British people were, and I think still are, very, very fed up of the political elites and seeing the decline in their living standards, seeing, their communities going to the dogs. And to a lot of people, it was an act of rebellion against what they feel is a sort of elitist and out of touch globalist system. an economy that doesn't work for them, a society that is cold-hearted and does not represent their values or their community. And so it was a combination, I think, of those two factors. There are other reasons you can go into it, but I think those are the main two trends I can see. The impacts, well, I couldn't say exactly what it is. I'm not an economist by any means, but it certainly has had an impact. There have been, lorries queuing up in the south of England. The amount, really, the biggest impact I think it's had is it's now it now takes such a colossal amount of bureaucracy to import things from Europe and send things to Europe. Everything has become so much slower, and it's sort of gummed up the logistics system, and it has had some pretty bad economic consequences. But with the war in Ukraine and sort of general decline of the world economy, it almost feels like it's fairly inconsequential these days.
Yeah. Are the British people happy with the outcome of Brexit, or?
Oh my God. You're asking me a bunch of tough questions today. No, it's a good thing. It really depends who you ask. I think if I had to guess, I would say most people probably don't want to go back in. Most people probably think, well, okay, it's had some pros, some cons, but we made the decision now, we might as well stick with it. People really don't want to revisit the issue, and no politician really is willing to do it because we had the referendum and we carried out the result. There's no sense, crying over spilled milk. Let's just make the best of it. There sorry. There certainly are some people who really feel very strongly that we have to rejoin as soon as possible, but I think they're just a very vocal minority, to be honest.
How do you feel? Do you think you should rejoin the European Union or stay out?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of quite anti-EU. I don't have any problems really with immigration. I don't mind foreigners. I think, a little bit of cultural diversity is quite a nice thing, and they do contribute. But the problem I have with the European Union is I don't think it represents working people very well, or working class people. It was set up to facilitate, the free movement of money and wealth and trade, and very, very often it sort of protects those interests, those wealthy business interests, even when it's not beneficial to ordinary people. Well, I have a law degree. I had to study European law, and I was horrified by some of the things that the sort of courts of the European Union say about things like the right to strike and the rights of workers. So I'm quite a big critic of the European Union. It does some good, but not enough to outweigh the negatives for me. And I think, I wasn't old enough to vote at the time of the referendum, but if there was another one, I'd probably vote to stay out. I think let's make the best of the opportunity we've got.
Gotcha. So since 2016, you have had four different prime ministers. There was Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and recently now you have, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Rishi Sunak. Is that right? All right.
Yeah.
Why has there been so much changeover, and what has the effect been on the British people?
Okay. Interesting. Well, Theresa May, Theresa May basically was sort of forced out of office because of the debates over Brexit. She was very, very pro-Brexit and tried her best to negotiate a deal, but it was a very long, drawn-out process. And it was felt she handled it incredibly incompetently and couldn't negotiate a deal that would satisfy Parliament and the public. So she was sort of forced out by Boris Johnson, who came in, said, let's get Brexit done. Very simple message. Won a massive sort of landslide victory for the Conservative Party in the general election of 2019, which I was, of course, very disappointed by. I was campaigning for Labour at the time. It was very, very miserable. But he sort of came in, and then the COVID pandemic hit, and we really struggled to deal with that. And the government made a number of enormous mistakes about how to handle it, like stuff like um, letting people who were positive with coronavirus, care home patients who were in hospital with coronavirus, sending them back to care homes to free up hospital beds. And then, of course, they infected all the other
Yeah.
people in the care home, like really brutal mismanagement. But the thing that got Boris Johnson in the end was the news that he'd been having parties in Downing Street. He passed the law saying, oh, you have to do social distancing and wear a mask, and everything, and no large gatherings. And meanwhile, him and his colleagues were getting drunk in his office, basically, and throwing parties for all the staff and stuff. Really embarrassing scandal. And he was forced to resign, and Liz Truss came in, and she lasted, I can't even remember, it was only like a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, it was real quick.
Yeah, and the reason why she had to resign was because she screwed up the economy basically from day one. Her budget, her budget was very right wing. It was all about cutting taxes, all the standard right wing fare, supporting the hedge funds, the banks, and so on. But it met with such hostility from the market that she was forced out by the Tory party, because almost overnight they lost their reputation for economic credibility. And the cumulative effect of all these different political scandals and failures, I think the public trust in politicians in Britain was already low, but I'd say it's non-existent at the moment. You speak to people and they just don't care about politics. At best, they treat it like a joke. You couldn't convince a lot of people to care one way or the other. Huge amounts of apathy, because if people are so incompetent in politics, what's the point in even voting?
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel the same way here.
Mm.
Boris Johnson, he seems like kind of a character. Like, what's up with his hair? I thought Donald Trump had crazy hair, but then I see this guy. Like, what's his whole like story? Like he just seems like the last kind of person anybody would vote for. You know.
Mm. Well, I think people sort of were fond of him because he came across like a bit of a joker, and it made him seem down to earth, relatable to the common man. I mean, never mind the fact that he's from an incredibly elite family and went to Eton and Oxford, and spent his entire life mooching around in sort of wealthy idleness, as it were. So he's a very upper class gentleman who worked very hard to create this sort of public persona of him as relatable and down to earth, to hide the fact that he comes from an incredibly upper class background and doesn't give a damn about ordinary people. And it worked. And I think the hair was part of the mystique, part of the charm and the charisma, because it made him look slightly goofy. You can't find a man like that threatening. Someone like oh, I don't know, Margaret Thatcher. You have to take her seriously because she takes herself seriously. You can't do that with Boris Johnson, because
Yeah.
he plays the clown.
It's interesting. It's kind of comparable to Donald Trump, because
Mm.
Donald Trump, he's this wealthy guy who's born with some people say silver spoon. I say diamond spoon in his mouth. And, but people here, a lot of working class poor people kind of see him as being on their side when really he only cares about himself. So the most recent prime minister, Rishi Sunak, he's the first non-white prime minister. How did the British people react to that, and what is their perception of him?
Oh, interesting. Quite well, I think. The reaction was quite muted. I mean, you always get some online trolls, but generally people had no objection um, to having a sort of non-white prime minister. Sorry, what was the second part of that question? Can you repeat
What
that?
is the perception of him?
Okay.
Like here in America, we had Obama, and there was like he was the first black president. and there was a huge, outpouring of like celebration, and also some people were upset about that. Was it similar in Britain when
Oh,
he
interesting.
selected?
Well, nobody was really upset. There was, I think, some like what's the word? Celebrating. Yeah, there was some celebrating amongst the British Indian community because, of course, he's of Indian descent, and so they were quite pleased about it. But I think here we sort of have judged Rishi Sunak on his policies, not his ethnicity. Uh, he is quite an elitist individual as well, and he couldn't hide it even if he wanted to. The man's effectively a billionaire. His wife is sort of from a family of industrialists. They do all sorts of oh, do you know what? I better not say that because that might be libel. Um,
Yeah, don't want to get
but
canceled or anything.
yeah. But they're certainly elitist individuals. That's a very fair thing to say about them. No, nobody could deny that. I think my favorite story is a Rishi Sunak visit. This is completely true. It was on the news. Rishi Sunak visiting a homeless shelter and going up to a homeless man and saying, "So are you in business then?" Yeah.
Oh man, yeah,
Yeah. And
that's crazy.
the economy's in such a dire position. I think the Tory party in general, they could have any leader in the world and it wouldn't make a difference. I think the public has sort of lost trust in them to manage the economy, and they are on the way out at the next election, in my opinion. You heard it here first.
So, the royal family, here in America, everybody is like obsessed with like, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and William and I forget his wife's name, but everybody, they're all on the tabloids and things like that. What role does the royal family play in UK politics, if at all?
Okay. Well, again, it depends who you ask. So many of these questions. I mean, Britain is a very divided society sometimes. Generally, they have no day-to-day influence over politics. They create sort of a very good stream of newspaper articles for like the gossip columns and stuff, but they don't influence politics generally. However, there is some privileges they have over the legislative system to effectively veto legislation where it affects them personally. And this has been used sort of to do things like protect their tax privileges, to protect their wealth, essentially. I don't know all the details offhand, but it's been talked about and reported on in some of the more liberal newspapers like The Guardian. So they couldn't the king couldn't come into the House of Parliament to dismiss the Prime Minister and say you're all incompetent. Generally, Britain is a democratic country, but they have some sort of soft power to persuade and advise and interfere behind the scenes by writing letters and stuff. So that's the power of the British monarchy today.
All right. So one thing you said is that you are a socialist. That is correct, right? So I
Yeah, oh,
know this
absolutely.
is a huge topic. You know, capitalism is destroying the planet, and one thing you said in your emails, you said the only way forward for the human race is to socialism. Like, how do we even start to begin that shift? And I know that's a huge question, but like, how do we get there? How do we begin to transition? Personally, I don't think it's possible. I think that there would have to be some kind of total collapse of our whole system before socialism could even begin. But how do we do that? How do we start to transition to socialism? Is it as easy as just getting more liberal politicians in office, or you know?
Just before I answer that, do you mind if I top up my water?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure,
Yeah,
I'll come back in one.
hey, no problem.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, But are you looking to reach a dynamic and engaged audience of curious minds? Well, look no further. Bright Brains Podcast is the perfect platform to showcase your business or product. You'll be able to reach a diverse and intelligent audience and engage with listeners passionate about personal development, technology, and more. Elevate your brand through thought-provoking discussions. Don't miss this opportunity to promote your business on one of the fastest growing podcasts in the market. Contact us today to discuss advertising options and elevate your brand to the next level. Contact us at brightbrainspod@gmail.com to secure your advertising spot on Bright Brains today. Again, that's Bright Brains with a Z, pod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. Now, back to the podcast.
Right, I'm back.
All
Yeah,
right, no
so
problem.
how do we start to achieve socialism? Well, I think your skepticism is shared by a lot of people. There's so many people in the world who say socialism, it's a great idea, but it could never work for all sorts of different reasons. You know, the biggest ones include stuff like, oh, it's not in human nature, etc. It's nonsense, it's totally unscientific. But there's a widespread skepticism, and I think we on the left, we in the socialist movement, have to respect that and meet people halfway, and do the best that we can to sort of overcome these arguments through rational means of persuasion. Well, regarding how you actually go about starting it, will a crisis, a sort of general global crisis, might not be as far away as you think. I
True.
think with climate change, you know, there is going to have to be some kind of radical change to the way our planet works, one way or the other. And I think over the next 20 years, you'll see a lot more crises sort of spurred on by environmental disasters. And you're going to see millions of refugees moving across the world, which is going to cause an even bigger right-wing backlash than there is now. And you're going to have political turmoil, people arguing over sort of increasingly limited resources. So, you know, we'll see what the world looks like in 20 years. Maybe we'll all be ready for socialism. And hopefully there'll be a strong socialist movement there, ready and waiting to answer the call, as it were. And so, in a sense, we have to sort of start thinking in the long term and building up a sort of independent political socialist movement now to think about the future and what's going to happen in the future, and how can we sort of play our part in protecting the planet, or at the very least picking up the pieces afterwards. But in the meantime, the solution certainly, I think, is not to elect more liberal politicians. I mean, well, it depends what you mean by liberal, because I better stop to make a point out this actually. In Britain, the terms liberal and conservative have slightly different meanings. I mean, it's becoming more Americanized because you guys are like the sort of culturally dominate the entire rest of the world, really. But generally, liberal would not include socialist or communist or whatever in Britain. Liberal sort of is a much more moderate and centrist ideologies. People like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, rather than sort of more socialist figures like Bernie Sanders. So if you mean liberal in that sense, no, the solution is not more liberal politicians. But electing people like Bernie Sanders might make a difference in the short term. It won't lead us to salvation, but, you know, it's better than nothing. I think the biggest thing is to try and bring back the trade union movement and get the working class organizing themselves. You know, the basic idea of socialism, you know, even people like Karl Marx say similar things, is that the working class themselves have to be the ones to free themselves from capitalism. It's those who are exploited who have to free themselves from capitalism. We're not going to be saved by politicians or celebrities. you've got to get out there in your community and actually speak to your neighbors and your friends and organize something in your community. And especially trade unions are an excellent place to start. I think that's what you've got to do. You've got to build up a sort of political organization, street by street, as it were.
Yeah, I agree. And it feels like everybody is sort of atomized.
Mm.
Communities are breaking down, and if we do want to have that kind of socialist world, we kind of have to build back up our communities. Like you said, politicians aren't going to save us. I agree with you 100% on that. Um, so I just have one last little question. I just want to do like this kind of little rapid fire thing, and I just like kind of throw out some issues and just kind of like a quick little like
Okay.
explanation. So one thing I keep hearing about in Britain is knife crime. There's been a huge increase in knife crime. Here in America, we have a gun problem. Looks like you guys have a knife problem. So what's the cause of that, and what has been going on to try and like kind of fix that?
Gosh, I don't know what they're doing to fix it, but I'd say the cause is increased poverty and sort of public spending cuts, closure of youth centres and stuff like that. It's mismanagement by public services pushing young sort of working class children towards the gangs.
Yeah. Margaret Thatcher.
She destroyed British industry. A lot of working class people still hate her. Whatever you might think this is distasteful, but a lot of working class people celebrated when she died. She was the bitter enemy of the trade unions, and she was basically responsible for the collapse and outsourcing of all of the sort of heavy British industrial jobs.
Uh, Meghan Markle.
Oh, okay. So shockingly sort of hated by the British public, especially sort of older white men. I don't have a problem with it myself. She's a celebrity. I feel neither here nor there.
Yeah, same. Um, Jimmy Savile.
Ah, yeah. Well, we should have seen it a lot sooner, and there are a lot of dodgy things where people sort of didn't ask questions they shouldn't have asked. They should have asked. Um, and if well, gosh, yeah, never should have been allowed to go that long without facing justice, or indeed never facing justice.
Yeah. So here's the last question. If you could have the prime minister do one thing in Britain, like if you had the ear of Rishi and he said he would do one thing, what would you have him do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would have him repeal all the anti-trade union laws because we have some of the most strict anti-trade union laws in the entire Western world. It makes it a nightmare to actually organize and go out on a strike. Workers' rights in many cases are a lot worse in America than they are in Britain. But the one thing you do better is trade union rights. And what I would give to have a British version of the National Labour Relations Board, that would be my one change.
Yeah, that'd be one change. Awesome. Well, hey, this was a great interview. I learned a lot. Um, where can people go online to find you? Do you have like a website or blog or anything like that?
I don't actually know. I don't use social media. I got rid of it because I found myself wasting too much time rowing with people on Twitter about
Yeah.
politics. So no, I'm afraid there's nowhere you can go and look me up. But what I'll say is, if you want to learn more about socialism, go and look at the website of the World Socialist Movement because they have a bunch of really great sort of articles and um, sort of like pieces about what it means and why we should have it.
Awesome. All right, then. Well, hey, thank you for coming on and take care.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks. Have a good day.
No problem.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us for another enlightening conversation here on Bright Brains. I hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to fuel your own bright ideas. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform or however else you listen to this podcast. Also, we can be found on all major social media. Just type in Bright Brains with a Z. And remember, the brightest minds are those that never stop seeking knowledge.